A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus proposed another parable to the crowd, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a man who sowed good seed in his field. While everyone was asleep, his enemy came and sowed weeds all through the wheat, and then went off. When the crop grew and bore fruit, the weeds appeared as well. The slaves of the householder came to him and said, 'Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where have the weeds come from?' He answered, 'An enemy has done this.' His slaves said to him, 'Do you want us to go and pull them up?' He replied, 'No. If you pull up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat along with them. Let them grow together until harvest. Then at harvest time, I will say to the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles for burning, but gather the wheat into my barn.'" He proposed another parable to them. "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a person took and sowed in a field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, yet when full grown, it is the largest of plants. It becomes a large bush, and birds of the sky come and dwell in its branches." He spoke to them another parable. "The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed with 3 measures of wheat flour until the whole batch was leavened." All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables. He spoke to them only in parables to fulfill what had been said through the prophet, "I will open my mouth in parables. I will announce what has lain hidden from the foundation of the world." Then, dismissing the crowds, he went into the house. His disciples approached him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He said in reply, "He who sows good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, the good seed the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Just as weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all who cause others to sin and all evildoers. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears ought to hear." The Gospel of the Lord. In the year 1947, an American author named Marcia Brown adapted an old folk story, and she made it into a children's book that was read to me when I was a little boy, and I'm sure many of you have either read the book or had the book read to you. And the book, as well as the story that it was adapted from, bears the title Stone Soup. And as the story begins, 3 tired soldiers are returning home from the wars, and they're making their way down a road towards a little village. And the people of the village hear that the soldiers are coming, and they talk among themselves. Soldiers are always hungry. They will ask us for food, but we have little enough for ourselves. So they hurried to hide their food. They put quilts over the carrots in the carrot bins. They hid their barley under the hay in the hay lofts. They lowered buckets of milk down wells. They hid their potatoes and cabbages under their beds, and they hung their meat in cellars. And then they waited. And when the soldiers came to the village and they asked, "Can you spare us a bite to eat and perhaps a place where we could spend the night?" the people of the village replied, "We have no food for ourselves. It has been a poor harvest." And not a single peasant had any food to give to the soldiers. And so the 3 soldiers huddled together, and then the first soldier came forward and he spoke to the people of the village. "Good people, we are hungry soldiers. We have asked you for food, but you have none. Well then, we shall have to make stone soup." Stone soup? The peasants thought this might be something worth knowing about. And so the soldiers gave instructions. First, get a large iron pot and fill it with water, and put it over a fire to heat the water. And then, if you please, we need 3 round, smooth stones. And those were easy to find. And the peasants' eyes grew round as they watched the soldiers drop each stone into the steaming water. And as they stirred the pot, the first soldier said, "Stones like these generally make good soup, but it would be much better if we had just a few carrots." "Well, I think I have a carrot or 2, said a peasant, and she ran off, and she came back with her whole apron filled with carrots from beneath the quilt. And as the soldiers sliced the carrots into the soup, the soldier said, "Well, this soup would be better still if we had just a little bit of cabbage." "Well, I think I have a cabbage somewhere," said another peasant, and she ran off and she came back with 3 cabbages from under her bed. And the soldiers went on, "Well, if this soup just had a bit of meat and potatoes, it would be a rich man's fare." And the peasants thought about the meat hanging in their cellars and the potatoes under their beds, and they ran to fetch them. A rich man's soup, and all from stones. It seemed like magic. And the soldiers continued, "If only we had a cup of milk and a little barley, this soup would be fit for the king himself." And the peasants glanced at each other. The soldiers had entertained the king? But no use asking for what you don't have. And the peasants went running to get the milk and the barley, and all the ingredients were stirred into the steaming broth, and at last the soup was ready. "All of you shall taste," said the soldiers, "but first a table must be set." So great tables were placed in the village square and torches lit. And the soup, how good it smelled, truly fit for a king. And just to think, made from stones. But then the peasants said, "Should not such a soup be served with bread and a roast and cider?" And so a great feast was prepared, and never had there been such a banquet. And how good the soup tasted, made from stones. The soldiers and the peasants ate and drank and sang and danced far into the night. At last they were tired. So the soldiers asked, "Is there not a loft where we can spend the night?" "Let 3 such wise and splendid gentlemen spend the night in a loft?" No, indeed, you must have the finest beds in town." So the first soldier slept in the priest's house, and the second slept in the baker's house, and the third slept in the mayor's house. The following morning, the whole village got up to give the soldiers a send-off. "Many thanks for what you have taught us," they said. "We shall never go hungry again now that we know how to make soup from stones." And today we hear the short, the simple, the elegant parable of the mustard seed. Like the stone soup, it starts out humble, seemingly insignificant, but like the soup, it grows, it flourishes, and becomes something magnificent, providing both food and shelter. And Christ tells us this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. It will grow, it will flourish, and it will provide shelter and sustenance for all eternity. And if we think about the story of the stone soup and the soldiers and the peasants, we can think of something else too. The mustard seed, like the soup, didn't just grow and flourish on its own. It had to receive nutrients and water from the soil and light from the sun. And so we can tell ourselves, just like the soldiers were able to remind the peasants to look in their cellars, under their beds and the haylofts for the things that they could bring to the soup. So through the parable of the mustard seed, Christ reminds us to search our minds and our hearts for those things, our time, our talent, our treasure, our worship, that we can bring to build up the kingdom of heaven. And we do so in the hope that one day, just like the peasants, we will sit at the heavenly banquet to which we have all given a part. And today we celebrate Mission Sunday, and we will have a speaker who will tell us about a little part of that kingdom, the mission to educate, to form the next generation in the urban schools of our diocese. And I am a product of one of those schools. And as the second collection comes, think about the lesson that we heard today. The soup isn't complete until everyone in the village brings something to it.